Hi, I'm Malika Bilal, and you're in the stream. Today, banning the bomb. Will a global prohibition on nuclear weapons make the world any safer? We'll discuss the UN's effort to make nuclear weapons illegal. In a historic July 7th vote, nearly 2/3 of UN member states voted to make nuclear weapons illegal under international law, despite a boycott by nuclear nations and their allies. 122 countries supported the treaty. Once ratified, it would prohibit nuclear weapons possession, development, transfer, and even ban making threats to use atomic weapons. None of the 9 nuclear-armed states took part in the negotiations. The United States, UK, and France said the effort was not a realistic option for countries that have for decades relied on nuclear deterrence to prevent conflict. The treaty is also the first to make provisions for the humanitarian and environmental consequences of nuclear weapons testing and use. So today we ask, what is the safest path towards nuclear disarmament? Well, on set with me is Rae Acheson, director of the group Reaching Critical Will, where she advocates for disarmament and arms control issues. She helped negotiate the recent UN treaty. In Phoenix, Arizona, Kathleen Bailey, a specialist in defense and arms control. She's also a senior associate with the Washington, D.C.-based National Institute for Public Policy. And in Albuquerque, New Mexico, Tina Cordova, co-founder of the Tularosa Basin Downwinders Consortium. She represents a group of U.S. citizens affected by nuclear weapons testing at the Trinity test site, where the United States exploded its first atomic bomb in 1945. Welcome to all of you. And I want to start with a member of our community. This is Avita. She writes to us on Twitter. This is the usual division of the haves and have-nots, a lot like the UN conference debates. To be effective, you need exactly those who oppose it. Otherwise, it's preaching to the converted, while the actual actors don't want to hear about it. So, Tina, you read this tweet, and you know that we live in a world where none of the countries believed to have nuclear weapons agreed to this treaty. What difference, then, will this ban make for you personally?
Well, first of all, we have to acknowledge, and that has never been done, that in the government's rush to get to Japan, there was a test that was undertaken in the desert of New Mexico, and that people live as close to the test site as 8 miles, and a significant community, there were about 40,000 people living in a 50-mile radius, lived adjacent to the test site. And that when we produce nuclear weapons and we test them, that there are consequences, health consequences that people suffer. So on July 16th, 1945, 72 years ago, a couple of days ago, they detonated this bomb, they left, and the people here, I am what is referred to as a downwinder. I'm a cancer survivor. My family, my community, several communities in the surrounding area were what are referred to as downwinders. We were negatively affected by the overexposure to radiation that we experienced, and we continue to be affected by it today. And this is a generational thing. We're starting to see the cancer surface in the 2nd and 3rd generation now. And so, you know, people don't always realize that there are consequences to the development and testing of nuclear weapons. For us, it's a very serious, it's a very serious topic and very serious subject matter, and something that I don't think we can ever take lightly.
So, Rae, you heard what Tina said, and of course, it's traumatic and it's disheartening. Thank you for sharing your story. I know that can't be easy. What then do you think this treaty or this ban will mean for other people who are in those same shoes all over the world? Mm-hmm.
So we've heard from a lot of survivors of nuclear weapon use and testing that they're thrilled that this treaty has been negotiated. For one thing, it's an international recognition of the harm that they've suffered. The treaty is full of recognizing the disproportionate impacts on indigenous populations around the world in particular, also on women's health and on the health of young girls who have suffered disproportionately as well. And the treaty also contains specific provisions around victim assistance and environmental remediation that will cover past but also potential future use and testing, which hopefully we will not see anymore. But overall, this treaty is something that is designed to change the world that we're living in. And so the tweet that we heard earlier about what is the impact if the nuclear-armed states are not engaged and are saying that they will refuse to engage with it in the future. Well, this treaty was actually designed with that in mind, understanding that that is their position, that they still want these weapons despite these horrific environmental and humanitarian consequences that we know of. They still want to retain these weapons. So the treaty was designed to approach them, to change policies indirectly around them by allied states, by states that have rejected nuclear weapons, and 2/3 of the UN members have done so and are willing to change their own policies.
So I want to pause on that, because you said, so this, you kept in mind that nuclear-armed nations, ones believed to be nuclear-armed nations, would not sign on to this. And so I want to show you the response. Of course, you know it, United States mission to the United Nations. Take a look at my laptop here. This is a joint press statement from the permanent representatives to the UN from the US, the United Kingdom, and France. I'll highlight this part right here. We do not intend to sign, ratify, or ever become party to it. So even though it was designed with that in mind, Kathleen, weigh in here. What will it matter?
This treaty will not matter at all. It is a feel-good ban. And I think it's important to ask why those nations, particularly the ones who have nuclear weapons, are not interested in participating. It is the same reason that historically these countries have opposed the zero disarmament movement, and that is because zero is not verifiable. If you can't know how many nuclear weapons were actually produced, how much nuclear material for weapons were actually produced, and how to verify the absence of those, then everyone is under threat if you ban them without verification.
So zero is not verifiable. I want to show what that might mean. Take a look at a map that our team here put together, and these are the nations with nuclear weapons, estimated 15,000 nuclear warheads that we know of, the US and Russia having the most. Now you look at that map, this is the current state of nuclear weapons in the world. Ray, is that a reason for concern, or as Kathleen put it, could that be deterrence?
No, deterrence is just a concept that used to be known actually as mutually assured destruction. But with the end of the Cold War, it was sanitized to become this notion of nuclear deterrence. And a lot of people have built their careers off of selling this, and there's a lot of economic invested interests in sustaining the nuclear weapon enterprise with this concept. But in reality, these are weapons of terror. They are weapons of genocide. They are racist weapons. They have been tested and used mostly on non-white populations around the world. This is not a tool that was designed to never be used, but that is what we are told as the public.
Kathleen, I can see you there shaking your head. What are you thinking?
I'm thinking that there needs to be realism in this conversation. A nuclear weapon can be the size of a fire extinguisher. Thus, it can be hidden in the boot of a car, for example. So if you have weapons that are that small and you are basing your security on the idea that they are all going to disappear, and yet someone can hide them because they're so small, then you are at risk. Imagine yourself to be in a room where everyone is armed with a super weapon and they all agree to give it up. And so everybody puts them on the table, apparently, and they're taken out of the room. But one of those 9 keeps the weapon hidden. That bad actor is then able to intimidate and perhaps annihilate the remaining 8 in the room. Now, that's a small, scaled down example, but that's kind of what we have in the case of the world today. That is, that it is easy to hide weapons of mass destruction, particularly nuclear weapons. So it is extremely important that we be able to verify both reductions as well as total nuclear disarmament if we ever get to that point. That's the only way we can truly be safe and secure from nuclear weapons.
So Kathleen, I hear your point. I want to play you a video that we got from Max Tegmark. He's the president of Future of Life Institute. And I hear your perspective on why this treaty will not work. But Max says there could be one advantage to it. Have a listen to what he told us.
The UN treaty supporters obviously aren't naive and think that a ban will magically rid the world of nuclear weapons. But a ban will add stigma, which as a first step will pressure the nuclear powers to slash their excessive arsenals down to the minimum level needed for deterrence, which would be a great step in the right direction.
So, Ray, stigma, that is a potential outcome of this. Is that enough? And is that even one of the intended outcomes?
It was absolutely one of the intended outcomes for this treaty. And I think that we need to look at how other law has developed around weapons, but also just throughout history, how change has made. A lot of it has been through stigmatization, through public discourse, through norms changing over time. And that has been true of every social justice project that human beings have brought about in this world. And this is a follow-on from that. We've seen it with slavery. We've seen it with women's right to vote. We've seen it with homophobia and gay rights and trans rights. And we've seen it in terms of disarmament. We've seen it in context of landmines, cluster munitions, even biological and chemical weapons. None of these instruments, none of these projects has been perfect from start to finish. No one has been convinced at the outset, maybe, of the utility or even the desirability of a lot of these initiatives. But it's a gradual, iterative process that we can develop as a human species in order to build a better world for all of us. And I really, going back to Kathleen's point about realism in this conversation, I mean, we can talk about hypothetical future scenarios when we're down to 1 or 2 nuclear weapons, and I would love to have that conversation when we're living in that world. Right now, we have almost 15,000 nuclear weapons in the world, and none of the nuclear 9 states are interested in disarmament. And so this treaty has been a realistic effort to grapple with that situation, and 122 countries did not develop international law to feel good about themselves.
Interesting, good point. And you mentioned that this is a gradual process, and in the midst of it, though, and I want all of us to remember that there are people's lives at stake. And I think, of course, you were referencing that. I want to take a look at some of the people who spoke on behalf of nuclear test victims at the UN. This is Abaka and Jane Madison of the Marshall Islands.
Today, we carry in our bodies the legacy of these dreadful experiments. The cancer rate in the Marshall Islands is among the highest in the world. They treated us as guinea pigs. They told us it was for the good of mankind. The adoption of this landmark agreement today fills us with hope that the mistakes of the past will never repeat it.
And Tina, you hear that, but I want to bring this in before I go to you, because this is our community member, Hussein, who says, look, states only develop nukes to intimidate one another, to maintain their hegemony, not to wage war. Another person writes in, kind of on the opposite end of that spectrum, Simple says, actually, the most important long-term effect of this is unaware civilians that are exposed to radiation exposure during the atomic bombs tests in the past. So on the one hand, you have someone saying, this is deterrent, this is why we need them. On the other hand, you have someone saying, actually, there are victims here at stake, and they may not even be other countries, other citizens of other nations. They might be the citizens of that own nation doing their tests. And you heard some of the victims there earlier in that clip in the Marshall Islands. What do you make of that? How do you make sense of that?
Well, it's until you've experienced what we've experienced, it's really difficult sometimes to have empathy for the people who were, as we were, basically enlisted into the service of our country as part of this test. And what I can tell you is there are long-term and very far-reaching consequences, some of them that will affect people for many, many generations. In our specific case, the bomb that was detonated at Trinity, there was an isotope of plutonium that was used that has a half-life of 24,000 years. Our genetics have been affected. the people who were children, alive and children at the time, have all since passed away. I say all the time, we don't have elders in our communities any longer. They've all died to cancer. And I can only say that, you know, there are consequences, and sometimes it's innocent people. In our country, we have had innocent people participate in these tests, and I always refer to us as unknowing, unwilling, and certainly uncompensated innocent victims. And I don't think people have a reality of that all the time. And as it relates to the treaty, we have to start someplace. We have to start having a conversation about how we work towards nuclear disarmament. And from the perspective of somebody who was exposed inadvertently, I can only say that we support the treaty. We support the humanitarian inserts to the treaty, and we're in full support of the treaty, and it makes sense to us for a variety of reasons, but mostly because we know what the consequences are to the overexposure to radiation, to say nothing of the fact of the destruction, you know, from an actual nuclear device.
Kathleen?
I think that there is one thing that we can all agree on, and perhaps you know, not make it the centerpiece on the table and get to more controversial things. The thing that we can agree on is that nuclear war, nuclear weapons use is horrific, and it can end life as we know it. It not only can destroy humanity, but animals, innocent victims like the tigers in Siberia, for goodness sake, and the environment. It is something that we need to avoid. And so I totally concur that nuclear weapons use should not occur, and we must do everything in our power to prevent it. And that is why I think that we should focus on bolstering meaningful bans or meaningful treaties. And I would like to name one, and that is the Nuclear Non-Proliferation Treaty, which prohibits the proliferation of nuclear weapons. Another one that I think is very good, that focuses on delivery systems, is the Intermediate Nuclear Forces Treaty between the United States and then the Soviet Union, Russia now. That is a treaty that bans a set of delivery systems that would make it possible to lob nuclear weapons at one continent from another. And if we were to, for example, internationalize that INF treaty, the Intermediate Nuclear Forces Treaty, that is the sort of meaningful step that moves us in the direction of a safer world from nuclear weapons.
And in the meantime, though, while we move towards that safer world, here's one perspective from Micah, who says, we have to remember that these accidents can happen by accident, like 1980 Damascus incident, or the time the U.S. dropped 2 H-bombs over North Carolina in '61. And I'll just quickly tab through some of the headlines referencing those for our audience to peruse at their will. U.S. nearly detonated atomic bomb over North Carolina. Secret document. This is from The Guardian. The next one is from Salon. The night we almost lost Arkansas. A 1980 nuclear Armageddon that almost was. So accidents here. But what I want to show our audience next is this Nuke Map. It's called. This is sponsored by the College of Arts and Letters, Stevens Institute of Technology, and I think it highlights something that's a bit shocking. You put in the location that you want. You select a preset, and I'm going to select here the Davy Crockett, the tiniest U.S. bomb produced. You click there, casualties and the radioactive fallout, and it will animate it for you. You almost need a moment of silence as you see this. Estimated fatalities, 3,450. Estimated injuries, 780. Now, that's the smallest one. Ray, do you think, as the point Tina was making a little bit earlier, that not enough people are aware of the danger of the fallout of nuclear weapons? Is it something that we think about, oh, it happened in the past and we are safe now? We no longer have bunkers that we have to hide in. This is not something that actually affects us today.
Absolutely. I think that discourse disappeared with the end of the Cold War. I think that was a vibrant community level debate that was happening. from the 40s until the 80s. And unfortunately, that has dissipated. And actually, part of the process that led to the negotiation of this treaty was trying to build back up that awareness amongst government representatives and the public. And so 3 countries held conferences looking at the humanitarian impact of nuclear weapons specifically, and even of one single detonation, as you just showed on the computer, and looking at the possibility for response capacity from groups like the International Committee of the Red Cross and other humanitarian aid agencies all said that they would not be able to respond to a nuclear detonation, whether it was by accident or design. It would just overwhelm blood banks, hospitals. It would not be possible. And so reintroducing that conversation has been one of the major impetuses for the development of this treaty.
Kathleen, do you see? Go ahead.
I would argue that there is very, very high saliency, very, very high awareness in, for example, Tokyo and in South Korea of the possibility of a North Korean nuclear weapon being used against either Japan or South Korea. And those countries specifically have made the decision not to participate in this feel-good ban and instead to rely on nuclear deterrence because they know that a nuclear ban is not verifiable. They know that if we were to say to North Korea, you can't have nuclear weapons anymore, that we don't have a way to make that happen.
I want to play you a comment from Beatrice Finn. She's the director of the International Campaign to Abolish Nuclear Weapons. And she makes a comment that's similar to what you said, Ray, but I want to get her perspective in here. She says that this could be another step towards changing the laws of modern warfare. Have a look.
Since nuclear weapons were first used, we have developed international laws of war. We no longer consider mass slaughtering of civilians or indiscriminate bombing acceptable. And we have adjusted our methods of warfare, our weapons according to that. We ban biological weapons, chemical weapons, landmines, and cluster munitions. And now, thanks to the international campaign to abolish nuclear weapons, we have finally banned nuclear weapons.
So you hear her comment there, sort of echoing what you said earlier, Ray, but we got this tweet from Black Physicist. This is for you, Kathleen. Black Physicist says, Kathleen Bailey is right. This is simply a genie that cannot be put back in the bottle. Tina, I want to bring you in on the phone because I know that's there was a little problem with your connection, but we have you via the phone line. What do you make of this comment? This can't be put back in the bottle, and yet there are people still suffering the effects of things that were done in the 40s today. Where do we go from here?
Well, the comment is absolutely right. I mean, once the genie is out of the bottle, and since July 16th, 1945, our world has been changed forever. We've always lived under the threat now of an all-out nuclear war. And like I stated before, we have to start someplace. And maybe what we should do is, I mean, this treaty has now been ratified by so many countries. Maybe what we need to do now with the countries that are not willing to participate is ask them to work on a verification process. Maybe we need to, if verification is the issue, then let's address the verification process. I mean, that's what makes sense to me, and I don't want to oversimplify it, but it can be simpler than just saying we can't participate in a treaty because there's no way to verify. Let's work on a verification process. Let's figure that part of this out.
Kathleen, what do you make of that, a verification process? Is that an oversimplification of it?
Well, we've been working on how to verify nuclear weapons disarmament for decades, and thus far we have not been able to come up with sufficient technical means. And that's the reason why we turn from actual verification of warheads and materials to instead focus on delivery systems. And that's why arms control has predominantly focused on missiles, aircraft, and so forth, rather than the actual warhead.
This is all the time we have today, and I'm so sorry to have to cut this debate short because I know it could go on for so much longer. I want to give the last word, though, to our community member, Daniel Frost, on Twitter. He says, whatever the UN says, Countries will always have nuclear weapons because they feel the need for them. Defense, global action is needed. So that's just one perspective. Of course, there's perspectives on both sides. I want to thank our guests, Ray Atchison, Kathleen Bailey, and Tina Cordova for joining us, and of course, our community for being part of this as well. Thanks for watching. We'll see you online.